KKHT wants you to meet three of the classiest guys in real estate.
I am Chris Kelso, the maestro of mortgage.
I am Rob Cook, the godfather of real estate.
And I'm Joe Orsack, the king of credit swing. And together, we're
the Real Estate Rat Pack.
Much like us, real estate right now is smoking hot. So whether it's buying, selling, or owning, you need to check out the Real Estate Rat Pack.
They're here to take your calls and answer your questions live. Call now, 1-800-808-5548. And now, the Real Estate Rat Pack!
Good morning, everybody.
Where did that howl start? When did
I
that
don't
begin?
know.
That started a long time ago. Yeah, he's like, Yahoo!
Oh my.
You know, our last show of 2013.
Wow.
It's been a good ride this year.
It's been a great year so
I think we
far.
should come back next year.
I think we should continue it going. I would agree with you right there.
And Mike would like to stay employed, our producer.
As he's nodding his head saying, yes, please
indeed.
come back, please come back.
And secretly, I think he likes us.
Right.
I think he has more fun with us than anybody. So.
Well, you know, though, it's been a great year. You know, we can't end the year without talking a little bit about the great things that we did, specifically what we did last week as a group.
Was that an amazing event?
It was an amazing event.
Let's kind of recap what happened and how it transpired, where it started.
Well, you know, what's funny is that we had originally come up with, I had come up with outside of the Real Estate Rat Pack, a toy drive that we were doing. And that toy drive, when we originally were putting it together, we had reached out and touched base with about 5 different organizations to say, we want to raise money and or toys to donate to you. And one of the organizations got back to us late in the process, and that organization was DePelton's Children's Center. And when they called us back and said, you know what, this is what we'd really need, this is what we really like, obviously the Real Estate Rat Pack was not going to let any of the orphans and their center suffer because of that. So we actually came together as a real estate community. And we went out there and raised money.
And tell them who we raised it from.
Exactly.
From our alumni of the show.
Exactly. All from our alumni of the show and Target stores. Even though they're getting a lot of negative publicity, they came forward in a big way.
$1,600 in gift cards.
$1,600 in gift cards. And, you know, we expanded what we were originally doing for them. Originally it was, hey, I just want some sheets for the beds, and we want some, you know, if you can, get us a couple of PlayStations. That was it. We raised enough money to do sheets, to do all the bedding, to do all new pillows, to do shams, to do comforters. We got them new big screen TVs, or, you know, flat screen TVs.
47-inch televisions.
That is correct, televisions. We got them the PlayStations. We got them the games. We bought individual presents for every one of the 18 orphans that were actually in the location
got 3
right
gifts.
now.
But I also want to kind of talk about Best Buy also, because when we walked in, they said, well, we can do this deal for you on this. We can do this deal for you on this. And so they stepped up with, you know, making a deal when they found out what we were doing.
Oh, I would absolutely agree. You know, I mean, and there's so many shout-outs we need to do. You know, we need to first, you know, Target stores, absolutely incredible. Best Buy, absolutely incredible. But also all of our alumni, you know, and the list starts with Tim Soika. It goes down to Rick Dittemore. It goes to the Kennedy team with Teresa Kennedy. Samantha Merritt, Lorna Ramsey. All these are individuals, and I'm leaving some of them out.
We're leaving people out.
Like 15,
there's, you know, Jason Jimenez, one of our great individuals who sponsors the show, right?
Yeah, he stepped up in a big way.
He stepped up in a huge way. You know, all people over at Berkshire Hathaway who also put forward, you know, Mike and Rick and everybody. You know, it's one of those things that everyone in the real estate community stepped up, and our original goal to raise $1,500 morphed into about twice that amount.
No, actually, it's
over 5,000.
It's probably it's over 5,000.
That is correct.
It's over 5,000.
That is correct.
But the remarkable thing was the community coming together so quickly. It was everything.
It was such a short span of time.
From that Monday, we delivered everything that following Monday, and we'd raised $5,000 really in 4 days.
Right. I would absolutely agree. And, you know, one of the things we tell everybody is, you know, one of the things, if you're out there and you're listening to us today, let me tell you, it was extremely rewarding. I caught Joe in a moment, which he was sitting down, tears in his eyes, and just thinking about how we were impacting. And I will tell you, if you have not done this in 2013, let me tell you 2 things. One, find a charity, find an organization, find something that's passionate to you, and get out there and do something for them. Because let me tell you, you cannot imagine the reward and the feeling that comes back when you do that. Number 2 is that we have bigger and better things in store for 2014 at the Real Estate Rat Pack.
We're going to get a head start. Get more.
You know, we're going to start ahead of time.
On the heels of that, you know, what Rob pointed out, the alumni of the show were the source of that we were able to be able to bless the kids and all that sort of thing. When we say to support and work with the experts we bring on the show, it's not just expertise in real estate; it's a quality of person that we bring on the show. And we've had a lot of realtors on our show. Probably 40, 50 realtors over the course of the last year. There's not one of them that's been on the show that wouldn't be of great service to anyone in our listening audience that hired them. So I can't recommend highly enough, folks, if you're out there listening and you're considering buying a home or listing a home or anything else, hop on realestateratpack.com, grab any one of the shows from our past shows, and one of those realtors is going to be a fantastic person for you.
I would concur there.
My realtor family is a very giving family, and we are of service. That's how our mindset is. We are of service. And so it didn't surprise me that they were willing to do it. It did surprise me how fast it all happened. So, but I talk real briefly about who these kids are at the Pelchin.
And most of these kids at the Pelchin Center in Richmond come from families of abuse, unfortunately. So they were taken out of their families.
Which is why we couldn't take photographs of them.
That's correct, which is why you will never see any photographs or anything associated with that. And these are kids that unfortunately did not have a family member or any family to provide them a Christmas. And so, we were able to get there. I mean, the looks on their faces when they opened up those presents was
just a squeal of delight. And they fell in love with Gina and her daughter. They were there.
And she went back there, actually.
And she went back there on Wednesday, and they said, I'm so glad you came back. And she spent about 3 hours with them on that. So
yes.
If they want to see, at least from what we participated in, you can go to facebook.com/ real estate rat pack. And we did get pictures of all the gifts and the stuff we were able to provide. We couldn't take pictures of the kids. I would have just given anything to catch some video of all the stuff that was going on, but understandably, we weren't allowed to do that.
No, I would absolutely
agree. We're not finished yet. We've got money left over that we're going to buy some tablets for the staff.
For the staff, that is correct. We're still going to do some additional fundraising for next year for
whatever's left over. We're going to give them to as a cash donation. And the reason we bring this up, you said, "Well, this has had anything to do with real estate." Actually, that's not true. Real estate is a community, and this is about giving to your community.
Right.
And it actually made my Christmas, to be honest with you.
I'll tell you, I still think about it today. I'll think about it next year. And as we've always said, it's important to be able to give to get back. And I've always been in that. We also did a toy drive. We adopted 31 children.
You bust them in over to Monica Vaca's office over Century 21 on Memorial
correct. And
Drive.
You showed up over there and
I showed up over there and brought some toys and things like that.
We had pictures with Santa. They were actually printing off the pictures with Santa.
Yeah, but nothing's going to be as priceless as that picture of you as an elf.
I know. I've
forever going to live in the minds and hearts of men and women.
Very true. Also up on Facebook.com/ real estate rat pack.
But we're leaving out one name that was it would not have happened without this gentleman.
I would agree. Eric Dominguez, and if he's out there listening, we cannot tell you how grateful we are. But Eric Dominguez he works for Willowbend Mortgage, shameless plug.
It's
and
okay.
One of the things that he did, and independent of that, is he went out there. He went out there and procured all these items, and it didn't come from a single place. He had to be in his car, going to different Targets, going to different stores.
10 Targets.
He
different
invested
Targets.
his time.
He invested time in a big way. He went out there and he raised money at those different Targets. Every single Target he went to raise a total of $1,600. And we watched him work. That one day he walked into the Best Buy, and he walked in there, and the way he negotiated for these children and these deals was absolutely a thing of beauty to watch.
I think we're getting out of the mortgage business and put them in real estate.
Exactly. we got to put them in something to make some good money.
We got some talent there, without a doubt.
We definitely do. But Eric, if you're listening, big shout out to you, buddy. That wouldn't have been pulled off without you. Everything that you did was absolutely impeccable.
We had so much stuff we had to go rent a U-Haul.
That is correct.
And of course he was over there when we were wrapping the gifts the day before
party.
On Sunday when we were wrapping party at your house. So
yep.
And thank you to Regina for stepping up and helping wrap too.
That is
really
correct.
made, we had like 54 gifts to wrap. That made quick work of it, just like
just to put it out there, we kind of talked about it. It was last minute. We
yes.
made all this stuff happen in such a short period of time. I just want to put it out there. If there's anybody that would like to partner up out there with the Real Estate Rat Pack for this coming year, it's something that we want to do in a much bigger way and more organized way in the coming year. And Eric has already made the statement that he's getting started now to get involved, getting more sponsors and getting more people involved ahead of time, so that we can really provide a huge blessing to that organization next year. in 2014. So if there's anybody out there that would like to partner with the Real Estate Rat Pack to be a blessing to DePelchin and the kids there in that organization, give us a call, reach out to us. I'll give my email address, joe@improvemycreditusa.com, joe@improvemycreditusa.com. Shoot me an email, and we'll keep you in the family and make sure that happens for the year coming.
No, I would absolutely agree. And the great thing, we finished off, or we're finishing off 2013, but we also have some very good things. Speaking of finishing off, we have some very good numbers to go over in the real estate side of things, don't we?
Yeah, before we bring on the lovely Lauren Friese, who's with us here today, sitting right next to me, talk about, I've been in this business a long time. I don't even like to talk about it. Remember, I'm well-seasoned.
You're well-seasoned.
I'm
That
not
is
old.
correct.
I'm well-seasoned. 30 straight months, positive sales. They've been up. So
That's
supply of homes fell to 2.9 months supply, which
it was already an all-time, almost a real big low at 3.1
last, and it was from a 3.6 last year. But we're used to like 5 to 7 months supply,
right?
And so we're getting 2.9. We're going to talk to Lauren about this in a moment, about what that means when you're out working. And part of our show today is going to be about goals.
It's about goal setting.
Goal setting. It's about goal setting. If your goal is to improve your credit, get a mortgage, get a home, these are some things you're going to have to think about. And the supply of homes that are available are going to be a very big part of what you're going to be doing, how patient you may have to be. And so we talked about here the median price. I remember the median price hovered around the 150. It rose at 8.7%. It's now $181,000. That means half sold above, half sold below. And the average price is a whopping $245,000.
Wow. 245.
Or so. And you know what
it was at 236 like the month prior.
It is just incredible. But you know what? It's a simple, economic rule of supply and demand. Thank you.
That is correct.
It's exactly what it is. So, believe it or not, it's the under 80,000 that's not moving, which means that they're probably having issues with getting credit and getting mortgages.
Right.
So I'm thinking that's probably part of it.
It's tough down on that end.
We'll
talk about that on the credit side.
There is some training that it might be slowing down a little bit because we only had a 3.6% increase month over month, but still an increase is an increase, and we're going against record months. So we think
Correct.
It's going to slow down as far as the increase, but I think as the supply comes online, I think you'll see the sales follow up with, because we are poised as Houston. Amico Phillips is bringing in people. Our parent company, which is Berkshire Hathaway in Brookfield,
right?
It represents them in relocation. It's going to be big. They're located in the West Chase area. It's just going to be a phenomenal year, regardless of what the outside influences of some of the government things that we may agree or disagree with. We won't get into any of that. How Obamacare is going to impact jobs.
Right.
I don't think it's going to impact Houston.
Well, Houston is a bit of an anomaly.
It is.
One of the things we talk about all the time. We are located in one of the major economic centers of the world, not just the United States, but in the world. We are the absolute energy leader of the world when it comes to looking at what we have. You have upstream and downstream and midstream and everything associated with major corporations in oil and gas. You also have one of the leading centers in the world, again, in the medical community.
Right.
So you got the Texas Medical Center, and you've got all the derivatives that follow off of that.
Biotech is huge.
Biotech is huge. You also have the second or third largest port in the United States, the Port of Houston.
And first in some tonnage.
That is correct. And in tonnage, they're absolutely massive. And so you look at where we stand from an economic standpoint, from a company standpoint, from a infrastructure standpoint. Houston is not going anywhere. One of the things we talked about is that, you look back in the 80s when Houston was 80% oil and gas. We're still 50% oil and gas. But the problem is oil and gas is so much bigger now.
It's energy. It's energy stuff like that.
Exactly. And we have all the derivatives coming off of that. So it's absolutely phenomenal.
And if you, quoting Dr. Jim Gaines of the Texas A&M Real Estate Research Center, Houston does as much real estate business as 33 states combined.
Which
we
is
did
pretty impressive.
November 2013, all properties. This is just what moved through the MLS. This is not talking about new homes that are not on MLS. It's not talking about commercial property. $1,463,400,000.
Wow.
Which is like $200 million up from the previous year.
Yeah.
Gosh, almost
I can read the
right
screen.
below my net worth right there.
Yes, I am working with a script, folks. I'm sorry, I hate to do that, but I'm
Yes.
trying to make it sound like it's not scripted.
But you know what? Speaking of script, we are scripted to actually have to take a break here pretty soon. But when we come back, we'll have the great Lauren Friese and a lot of other information to talk about. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You can bet, as sure as you live. Something's gotta give, something's gotta give.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. Remember, you can call us. We are here in the studio live. 800-808-5548. Can you believe it? This is actually live radio going on. A live show going on. So if you have a question about real estate, you have a question about what you want to plan for 2014, questions about credit, about real estate, about mortgages, changes, opportunities, threats. I tell everybody the SWOT analysis that we always do. We are here and available to answer any of those phone calls for you. So, right now, let's introduce our guest.
Referring to slapping me.
Let's introduce our guest right here. We have Lauren, and I don't want to mispronounce your last name, but Friese?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Lauren Friese, Texas Real Estate and Company. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. So we're talking a little bit about 2013. Obviously, Rob just got through going over all the numbers. How have you seen it out there? Let's not just numbers, but feet on the street.
Feet on the street.
There's a lot of multiple offer situations, and I have to prepare my buyers with the mentality that when we're looking at properties, you need to pick your top three. When we put our offer in, our offers need to be cleaned. You cannot ask, for a lot of closing costs. If it's in multiple offers, you're going to be expected probably to pay more than sales price if you really want this home, and to put the strongest offer in. And they also have to make decisions quickly, so they really have to have their goals, their priorities, everything together, and also have to be pre-qualified and working with their mortgage officer. And so I do communicate with the mortgage officer to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when we present our offer, we have the strongest and one of the best offers.
Now, what is pre-qualified? I just want to know what pre-qualified means, because I'm always on my soapbox in regards to what a pre-qualification truly is.
Or pre-approval.
Pre-approval, that is
I'm
correct.
Sorry. I always interchange it, but pre-approval. I need that letter.
That was a trick question.
I know. I saw it. I need them pre-approved. I need that letter from their mortgage officer saying X amount of dollars they can afford, and we'll work in that ballpark.
Right.
So when we submit the offers, normally when I submit offers, I want the offer price that we submit and the pre-approval letter to match.
Right. And you mentioned a clean offer. A clean offer is, for all those listening out there, it's individuals who have been pre-approved. And pre-approved just doesn't mean running credit. This is a little my soapbox. It means actually showing W-2s and paychecks and have the whichever loan officer you're working with verify that information up front. That doesn't mean they're going to ask you for a ton of paperwork afterwards, right? It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to go through the whole process of getting a loan, but it's part of that cleanliness you talked about. Mm-hmm. The other part is understanding. I love what you said is have in mind what your goal is, and have in mind understanding that if it's a multiple property or multiple offer situation, know what you have as a goal going in, what your ability to move up or down or move away, because sometimes the best moves individuals can do sometimes is walk away.
Well, also then you put backup offers in, because I had a contract that went into contract on December 30th and we closed on December 27th.
Right.
It's a 7-day contract. It was a cash buyer, but what happened is that basically it was a backup offer that we put in. The first contract fell out, and that is still happening. And those realtors, they will go down their list and start calling people that they knew were interested or were part of the multiple offer situation.
Right.
So that's the best thing for your buyers. If this because they find a property that's option pending, or they are in multiple offers, still put that offer in. Get it out there so that other realtor knows that these people are really truly interested, and they can look at these people's pre-approval and see these people are serious.
Right.
Because there's also a small chance that first contract doesn't go through, and your realtor will get that telephone call. So they can end up getting the home
and
they
of course,
want.
what that does for the first contractors, they don't really have a lot of negotiate. If they're going to come back for repairs or anything like that, and the seller's like, well, I've got a backup offer, I'm probably not going to do those repairs. So if you're in the first position on a contract, and you know that there's a second contract, you might want to come back and say, what, I can live with this, but prioritize whatever you're going to have to do. If you're going to get again, we're talking about goals today. If you're going to get a house in this market, you're probably going to have to acquiesce on some issues.
Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, I would absolutely agree. And a lot of times, also know that going into multiple offer, one of the things that we're seeing a lot, especially on the multiple offer side, and Lauren, you can talk to this as well, is, you want to listen to your real estate agent in this offer process, because sometimes you can actually make an offer in which if your financing is very tight and it doesn't appraise, you might not have the difference to bring. And so, a lot of times financing can fall through, not because of a qualification issue, because of a property value issue, right? And we've been seeing some of that, right, Lauren?
Oh, yes, especially with how the market has changed and is moving so fast, and especially in certain areas where the prices have been a little bit depressed. And now there's this, we have a lack of properties on the market, and the demand is so high, people are willing to overpay.
Right.
There's multiple offers, numerous ones I've gone in. People are paying $15,000 plus over listing price.
Yep.
And it's an area you would never think that people would pay that much. But the demand is there. And yes, the appraisal is a huge issue. That's one thing that I know a lot of realtors, not just myself, we kind of get concerned about when we get that stage of, the contract.
Right
before closing.
Right. And the good thing though is we saw a little bit of an issue for a couple of months there. I want to say for about 4 or 5 months in which appraisals were struggling, and now we've been seeing, especially November and December, we haven't been struggling on appraisals like we have before because finally it seems like
It's
the
caught
market's
Number. I was just going to
starting to
ask
being caught
how
up.
that the appraisals. This is something I'm not familiar with on that side because this is such a bizarre thing where we're we're paying over property prices now. That's such a new thing to Houston. When a property has appraised at X number and ends up getting offers well over it, and the person has to come to the table with cash on hand, on the appraisal side, that price that they paid will reflect in the appraisal.
Absolutely.
How long down the road? I mean, immediately when they start pulling comps.
We work on
6 months from now.
We work on historic
Historical
data
for 6 months.
They go back 6 months, but they prefer to go back 3 months.
Correct.
If they can get good data within 3 months, or an appraiser will choose to do that.
So
absolutely.
the next, if 2 or 3 homes sell in a neighborhood overpriced, by 10%, then 3 months down the road, these, the next ones that sell are catching up.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it also depends because
Educational for me.
Yeah. But one of the things,
about
for
Joe.
example, that happened the other day is there was a multiple offer situation. There were some really good comps. There was 2 other homes that were in the multiple offer situation. But unfortunately, there was also a lot of homes that sold that were not in the multiple offer situation. They were a little bit worse quality, et cetera, et cetera. So unfortunately, it takes a little while for a community, a subdivision or community to sort of catch up right there. Because just because you have 1 or 2 really good homes within a community of 300 homes, there's a lot to choose from. So that's sort of what the lull was, I think, for a little while, is it took people a little while to price it out right. You had multiple offer situations on certain homes. And so now we're starting to see that a lot of that's starting to be caught up a little bit. And it's definitely impacting now that you can go in and offer correctly. I've always been of opinion that the true market value of a home is what a buyer and seller are willing to pay for it,
Willing
right?
seller, willing buyer, neither being under duress.
That is correct.
Yes.
That is what market value is. I want to give a hypothetical to Lauren as to, you've got somebody that has a house to sell because they want to move up or move down, either way. So talk about what you're going to tell them about putting their house on the market and then finding a new home.
To put in their house on the market and find a new home, well, I'd walk through and see about the presentation and make sure it's put together well. And because you don't want a house that has filled with clutter. Then also we look at the quality of the home to make sure we can price it right. And we'll pull, of course, some market comps and see where the market's going. I also look at the pending sales because it also shows kind of how fast the market is moving in that neighborhood. And we'll come back and I'll talk to them. And normally when I ask for the pricing, I don't go and tell them what price I'm going to list their house at. I get their feedback. I present my data. I give them a range, and then they will tell me what price that they will list their home at. And then I have them start focusing on where they want to be because we're talking about the future. I don't need them being so emotional about a house in the past that they mess up a transaction because they're so emotionally attached to some home that they were in. And because there's times that people get really great offers, and I've had this. People get really great offers on their homes, but they get kind of prideful, or they have this emotional sentiment attached to the home, and they can't let it go for $5,000 less, or whatever it is, or maybe even $10,000 because they're so attached to the past and they're not focusing on the future. And I have found that if I keep people focused on the future, they keep going forward, and they're excited about the future. So it's easier to let go of these properties. And it's even with the buyers when they start in their mindset and goal setting. It's like when I present their offers, I kind of give a little brief history to the other agent about what they're going to do, what their idea about the home is, but also make sure my offers, they're pretty clean. They're not going to ask for a lot of money in closing costs. They're not going to ask for home warranties if it's not needed. If they're already going in there with the mindset
There's no reflection on OneGuard, which we think you
Yes.
need on every transaction as a new OneGuard home warranty.
That is correct, absolutely.
But I'm saying not ask for the seller to pay
One of our
it.
sponsors.
I'm not asking for the seller to pay it. Just like
Right.
when you go in there, make your offer where it's, the seller is to be willing to get in contract. Because once you're in contract, that's where you have the property locked in. Then you have the option period to go back and negotiate repairs. And then you can go back and maybe get more stuff done in the repairs or get money accredited to the price or whatever if you don't come up out front asking for everything under the sun. So it's a different strategy.
Just
I-
it's a negotiation strategy.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in a seller market,
Right.
And you're describing it being more malleable as a buyer.
Yeah, but you got a seller who's
Yeah.
is also going to becoming a buyer.
That is
Exactly.
correct.
And when they get attached to the home, like Lauren was talking about, is you have to go back and revisit their goals. It's like, look, you've told me this is what you want, and this is why you're moving because this no longer fits your needs.
But here's something also I was going to ask Lauren, because this is, let me know how true this is, right? Is you have a buyer, you have a seller who's really attached to the home.
Mm-hmm.
How often is it true that the first offer is generally one of the best offers out there?
that is more true than what you expect.
Right.
It really is.
And the reason
how
why I was
that
saying that
works.
because, a lot, that's the old adage is generally speaking, your first offer is, and let me tell you, I've sold 2 homes in the past 10 years. I was one of those prideful sellers and said, there is no way I am taking this offer.
How'd that work for you?
And in both cases, 9 months later, I took an offer that was lower. Okay? And then, now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't in this market that we're in right now, right? So I want to preface that. What I'm saying, though, is more often than not, and Lauren can answer this, it's true, isn't it?
Yes, it is true. And also with sellers, just because we're in a seller market, you're right. Do not be too prideful. Focus on your goals, where you're going, because then they'll be happier. It'll be a smoother transaction, and they'll get to the place they want to be instead of 9 months later saying, "Man, I really wish I was in my new house." And
Yeah, it's. I was going to say it's not the thing itself to get attached to the sticks and the bricks emotionally. It's not about that. It's about why you're going to there. So, this show is focusing on goals. What is your goal? If you're selling your house, then you have a specific goal. You have something that you're shooting for. And if your need to hang on to the sticks and bricks of where you're at is superseding your goal of where you're headed to, that's a problem.
And in part of the goal setting this year, we know when we come back, I know we're getting close to a break again, is that we're going to probably talk about what rates might do. I want you to prognosticate a little bit, Chris, because I think we're seeing.
Prognosticate.
Yeah, that was a big word.
You have that on rental from the
I'm
library.
going to prognosticate
Back.
in the next, right after
That's
the
right.
break. That will be fun, won't it?
I checked that word out on a 3-day rental.
But it's something I think is when we're talking about goal setting, and if you're a seller, that's one thing. But if you're become a buyer and you've got a certain time that you want to meet, I want to be in by time the summer's over. We're going to put the kids in school, in a new school type of thing. So you have to start looking at it. If you're looking forward to buying a house and say your goal's in June, what might we be seeing at that time?
I would agree. We are coming up against a break, but Lauren, you gave some great information. How can we reach you if we have one of our listeners who wants to call you and list or buy a new home?
well, my phone number is 832-561-9018, and I answer my phone all the time. Or you could email me at lauren@Texas Real Estate Company.
TXRECO.com.
Yes, I always change that up. I'm seeing if you're listening.
So again, you can reach Lauren at 832-561-9018. She's not going anywhere. She's staying here. The problem is we are coming up against a break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
I'm like an ocean wave that's bumped.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. You know, one of the things we have in studio, which we haven't mentioned, is we have a very large audience. Audience, obviously,
Huge.
throughout the
Biggest
Houston
radio-
area.
Global.
We've mentioned that we have audience members that love to talk to us all the time out of Dallas and other
Yes.
areas. But, you know, we also have a very international audience.
Global audience.
We have a global audience. And actually, today in studio, we figured, you know what? Let's bring in one of those audience
Our
members that we
global
have.
audience is here in the studio
Our
today.
global audience
we
is
brought
here.
them all in.
Absolutely brought him on here. You know, where are you from?
Hello, I'm Alain Nicolas. I'm from Mexico, but my father is French, so I'm a bit mixed up.
He's a mix-up of French. And, and where were you listening to us when you were listening to us last time?
In a tram in Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands. Can you believe it? We had somebody all the way in the Netherlands
As soon as we
listening to
found
us.
out we had a guest in the Netherlands, we had to fly him in.
We flew him in and we said, here you are. Well, thanks a lot for listening to us all the time, by the way.
You're the one that's been downloading.
And, it's interesting because he reminds me, he happens to be also my nephew. And so one of the things that was
has
funny,
nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it, right? He said it really caught on. He said in the discos at nighttime over there, our 3 pitchers are up there and they're dancing to us, having a good time, redoing all of our shows.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff, wasn't it? Yeah.
True. You're very admired over there.
Everyone, we are huge in the Netherlands.
We're huge over there. You would
Our
not
best
believe
of
it.
CD has sold like 47 copies.
Yes,
there.
yes. We're almost going to become platinum.
Massive.
Yeah. Well, it is a lot of fun, though, and we do appreciate you listening to us over there. And it's fun for you to be able to be here actually and see us live.
Yeah, very fun, very interesting. I'm learning a lot, and I think everyone will have a house in the future, so it's very useful. I'm happy to hear you guys.
Well, thank you very much.
thanks for being
The curious part was we were talking about, we're talking about everything going over here, but it's really a lot different over in some of the European countries that you were at. One of the things that we take advantage of here is actually buying a home and owning a home.
Yes.
In Europe, it's not necessarily the case, right?
No, the case is, it's different depending on the country, but mainly the state is the owner of the land, and you can sublend, let's say, by a trust, a property, but you are not the owner of the land. So you don't acquire directly the rights of it.
Wow. Well, it's one of those things we talk about. Man, are we fortunate to be here? Are we fortunate to be in a strong market in Houston? But also just the little privileges that we do get in financing or owning our own property here. You truly end up
that
having
is
it.
part of the American dream still. I think it's still
Yep.
true today as it was 200 years ago, is that, owning your home, owning the land underneath your home, and being able to enjoy your life with your family.
That is correct.
That is the American
We have
dream.
the freedom to do so.
That is correct. That is correct.
So I'm going to come back to what we were talking about, Chris. And I've seen rates edge up a little bit, and if the Fed stops buying mortgage-backed securities, what do you think we might see? Because that's the goal.
Well, if you look at 2014, and we're talking about obviously on the radio show, we're looking at goals for 2014. So one of the things is that I would tell everybody is if your goal in 2014 has been, well, let me wait and see. The wait and see approach is not a good approach in real estate, right? And
Not
because
in this market, no.
not in this market, right? For 2 reasons. One, we talked about because multiple offers, home prices, valuations, etc. But from a financing perspective, here's a couple things that you have to know that's going on. Number one is rates have nowhere to go but up. Now, obviously, the Fed announced that they're going to stop some of their mortgage-backed security buying. They tailored it back by about $10 billion, and so of their
Government
normal,
dollars, that's nothing.
But that's nothing, right? The problem is what generally happens, though, is that the traders are who truly make the bond market move up and down. The government does a little bit of it. The government's been trying to keep rates at a very low rate. But let's face it, one thing, we cannot get to a truly stronger market and have lending redevelop outside of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and FHA and VA without rates rising. And so one of the things the government eventually wants to do is have rates move up so that a private market can start being created and that new products can be introduced in the market. Because remember, the ultimate goal is to phase out Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae or reprivatize them or get them out of the government subsidies in which they're in right now. So the rates are going to go up. And I tell everybody, they're still extremely good, though. So I get this all the time. Individuals over the past month come to me and said, oh, my gosh, you got to be kidding me. The average rate today is 4.625. What happened when a month ago when it was 4.375 on a 30? And I tell everybody, do you realize that the relative difference in your payments may be $30? So relatively speaking, it's a very small change in regards to a monthly payment, right? It might look better in an interest rate-wise perspective, but let me tell you, I
think it's bragging rights.
Yeah, I think it's more bragging rights than anything. But at the end of the day, though, if you are out there and you're looking at refinancing your property or buying a new home, know 2 things. Number one, it's not going to get easier. Okay, the market has introduced what they call qualified mortgage, the QM rules, which are going into effect, has a new 3% rule in effect, has a new debt-to-income ratio in effect, has a new ability to repay factor to it. So there's 3 factors going into it. And the other thing that's going in is that rates are going to continue to move up. There's no way to stop that.
We'll talk about that QM and talk a little bit about that. It's the back ratio.
That is correct.
Total debt to income.
Total debt to income
And I believe
ratio.
it's 43% under the new rules. Is that correct?
So what a qualified mortgage, all lenders want to initiate a qualified mortgage because of the Safe Harbor Act, okay? So what a Safe Harbor does is it protects lenders such as ourselves against the borrower coming back upon us, right? For, from a legal reason, layman's terms right there. So what's happening is qualified mortgage rules mean that you have to maintain a 43% total debt to income ratio or less. Now, what's going to happen, because there's no variance in that? I mean, you can't go 43.01. You've got to stay at 42.99999 in order to get qualified, basically, is that most lenders are probably going to start off lower at the beginning of the year. So they're not going to qualify you on 43%. They're going to qualify you on 41. So now let me tell you, it's a smart lending practice. But here's what's happened. A lot of clients right now are getting loans at 45 and at 48 on FHA or 50% on FHA.
Especially right now, having just went through Christmas.
That is correct. So a lot of them are getting a lot of those
It's a lot
things.
higher.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so what's happening right now is that people are going to have to be a lot more conscious of what their debt-to-income ratio is to be able to make sure it gets down to that 40 to 41%, so the lender feels very comfortable in meeting the 43%, because here's what happens on the back end. If I qualify somebody at 43 and I go to sell it off in the secondary market, and the secondary market person who's sitting there says, I don't like the way you calculated income. I think their income's $1,000 less per month. I don't have a qualified mortgage at that time. So then I have to eat a loan in which I have no more safe harbor provisions on.
Now you have to eat it even if it's not in default?
That is correct. That is correct. If it doesn't qualify, that would be something that we'd have to
use
service
a
ourselves.
lot of ketchup to eat a loan.
That is correct.
Well, but I recall
dry.
back in the 80s that,
Very
an FHA loan was 28 and 36, 28% of your front ratio and 36% of the back ratio, and rates were 14%, and we were still selling houses.
That is correct. And, the one thing that I've always said, right? So if you look at what's happened, we go back in history for the past 5 years. I'm going back history prior to that. We used to have down payment assistance programs. They're gone. We used to have 0% financing for FHA. It's gone. So what we've been doing, and you've seen this over the past couple of years, is we've been going back to the old style of lending, which is truly get an individual who is not taking 50% of their gross income, okay, and making sure that an individual who's getting into home are stronger, more qualified buyers in today's market. That's what we want. I mean, Lauren, you know this is just like I do. We want to have buyers that are very, very well qualified because it makes a better neighbor. It makes a better home buyer. It makes a better community. Last thing you want to have is a foreclosure out there.
Exactly. Yes.
So those are some of the things you're going to continue to see. Rates are going to rise more, not necessarily because of QM, but rates are rising because of what's going on in the market. Right. It's mortgage-backed security are no longer to be bought by the government or subsidized by the government. It's the traders who want to continue to trade up. It's our market, our natural market, that is going to cause rates to move up. Supply and demand.
We mentioned earlier, and I wanted to, since we're kind of on that subject, that the properties weren't moving as much on the lower end.
Right.
And is that strongly driven by, because a lot of the properties on the lower end are the government purchased loans, and they're getting out of that. We see less of that, and the qualifications are getting tougher. Perhaps is that what are we seeing on that? What do you think is a driver there? I've got some ideas.
One of the things that I tell everybody is, number one, discrimination in lending is illegal, right? So you can't discriminate against the buyer no matter what type or product they're buying, or more importantly, what type of loan they're obtaining, independent upon what the price of the property might be. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of communities we have here in Houston in which some of the sub $150,000 communities, sub $100,000 communities have a lot of challenged borrowers. These are borrowers that have a tendency to be first-time home buyers or have income levels that unfortunately are smaller than your $300,000 buyer. So what ends up happening on these areas is a lot of times, because I have a lot of these buyers. I mean, I have a lot of Hispanics, for example, who are buying their first home. Well, guess what? They have a lot of mattress money, right? Their banking system, I mean, let's think about it. They grew up in a lot of times in countries in which they didn't believe in the bank. And so the last thing they believe is putting their money back into the bank here, right? And so you have a lot of individuals that just don't understand how to go through the buying process because they haven't been educated in it. I mean, I had an individual that we just got through closing last month, but I've been working for him for 6 months and saying, you know what, every paycheck, every time you get it, don't get it and put it in cash and keep it in the mattress. Take it, start a bank account, and put it in your bank. I need it to be seasoned. I need to show that you have a history of doing so. So it's a lot of it's that education that you have to get around in order to get it.
Do you see on the lower end, I think this is the case from my background, what I see.
Right.
Do you see on the lower end people carrying more debt and having issues with the debt ratios that we're looking at.
You know, it's funny because the ones who have credit, yes, I would agree, absolutely. The problem that I have most of the time in that level is most of them don't have any credit. Yeah, and you know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
right? Because what their philosophy has been is I paid everything in cash.
Yep.
You know, I did everything in cash. I didn't understand why I needed to establish credit. You know, and this is where we get back to you. You know, this is why you have to learn how our system works.
Yes.
And how to establish credit in this system.
And before Joe starts talking, because I want to segue to Joe, and I'm segueing for you here.
Segue.
I'm segueing is that you talked about people who, you had to go out and buy a new set of tires, and
Yes.
you bought a nice Christmas gift to buy yourself. Safety is always important.
Yay, new
but we
tire.
get a lot of people at this time of year have charged up their cards.
Yep.
And so they're going to try to come to you, Chris, and get a loan, and you're going to say, can't help you. You know, you missed a payment on that one credit card. Or
Actually,
something
I don't
like
say I can't help you. I say there's a guy I know very well.
Yes.
He has a company called Improve My Credit USA.
Yay,
he will
shameless
give you a
But-
free analysis, and then Joe
Right.
takes it from there.
Yeah, but the thing is, but we're talking about setting goals, and
Yes.
so we've got somebody who's probably gotten a little bit too much on their credit card, may have missed a payment here and there because of the holidays. What kind of lead time are we talking about when we're starting to have? Maybe they're not major issues, just issues like we're talking about.
Well, we have two things we're talking about here that are equally, problematic in obtaining a loan. We have some experts out there that, in essence, tell you to cut up credit cards, unplug from the credit system, and just get off the grid and use cash.
You can say his name, Dave Ramsby.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, my God. He's going to sue us now, Rob. Anyway, and I disagree with him on that. And I disagree with him from the premise of a biblical standpoint of what it means to be a good steward of finances. I would love to have that conversation with him because I'm prepared for it. In America, in my opinion, it's not possible to be a good steward of finances and also not use credit properly. And we're touching on why. We're coming up on a break, and so we'll jump into it. I know I just said something like majorly controversial to the audience. So when we come back, we'll touch on how to use credit responsibly as a good steward of your finances.
And I would agree. I think it's about how to use it responsibly as a good steward of your finances, as you mentioned right there. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, obviously, finishing up 2013, going into 2014, and some of the great things we have in store. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
When you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight. Fever.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack
We're
Show.
back.
Man, during the
I
break,
just
it's always
offended
funny.
everybody a few minutes ago.
We've always talked about this. We need to do a Between the Break show.
Yes. We continued the debate about credit off air, and we already solved the whole conversation, so we're done.
That is correct. But keep going. I mean, one of the things we're talking about, obviously, from this perspective is, a lot of individuals are out there, and whether they believe in Dave Ramsey or another program, and let me tell you, I believe 100% if you can do something in cash and pay it off right away, that's the way you need to do it. But there is a way to follow his program and be a good steward of credit at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would argue that in America, to be a good steward of your finances involves being a good steward of credit and utilizing credit in a way that is advantageous to you. Now, I'll give a big out to his strategy in this. The rice and beans mentality, cut up your credit cards and unplug from the credit system, is kind of like the military for some people in that they just need it to get their life in order, right? Some people need to be slapped with some hard, cold reality of live in a budget, and if that means eating rice and beans, then so be it, right? They need that.
Right.
But from an overall perspective, long-term strategy in being a good steward of your finances, you are doing yourself an injustice and you're doing your savings and your income an injustice if you aren't utilizing credit responsibly.
Right.
Responsibly. Every person in the listening audience, in my opinion, should have 2 to 3 major credit cards that reward them, that pay them for their usage, that have low interest rates, that they pay off on a regular basis, or carry an extremely minimal balance on a month-to-month basis. I would recommend that to the listening audience because doing that, when they want to go to you to get the mortgage, now they have an excellent credit history. They have no issue. They have the 3 trade lines you want to see. Life is beautiful. They pay less on auto insurance. They pay less on all their insurance across the board. They get the best rates on all that stuff. So it's not like you can't be a good steward of your finances and utilize credit. You absolutely can. I have a card that pays me to use it on an annual basis. I have a membership fee, and I have positively, massively increased the amount I took in off of it over the cost of the card. They're out there. Just being a good steward of your finances, you can absolutely look for that kind of stuff. If you travel a lot, you can use cards that give you free travel packages. I know families that travel absolutely for free just because they move money through the card. Move it through the card. You notice how I said that. And that they don't carry balances month to month and pay exorbitant interest rates on their purchases. They just move money through the card. Bills that they would have paid cash for, they put on the card and then turn around and pay the card off.
Right.
So it's just passing through the card, and through that, they get major benefit. So, you know, we have two different people. I want to talk about 2 points here. The no credit person and the too much debt person on credit. One of the things that people don't realize in being a good steward of finances, especially coming through Christmas, that's when cards, you know, get charged up, the budget gets a little blown out, you know, that kind of thing. And now you're looking at having debt. Well, we talked about goals on this show. And it's very much about how you approach your debt is very much about what your goals are.
Right.
If your goal is to buy a house, that's a different goal than to get out of debt. It is. So consequently, you approach how you pay those cards in a different way. All right. If you want to get out of debt, the debt snowball that Dave Ramsey talks about, great. Works wonderfully. Start with the lowest card, pay it off. Take that payment that you would have had on that card, roll it into the next highest balance, and just keep snowballing that into the largest debt. Great strategy. And there's little psychological victories. People always ask, well, shouldn't I pay off the highest interest rate card first? You know, the difference between the two, not so great, but the psychological victory of paying off one card and being able to say, I've checked that one off, and I take those money and roll it into the next one, it ends up negating it, and it's a lot more rewarding. We need those short-term rewards to motivate us to keep us going, you know. So I like that strategy. That's the get-out-of-debt strategy, right? However, if your goal is to get a home loan and the time frame you have negates your ability to pay off all those cards, like really we have to be in a new home in 6 months or 12 months, and there's just no way we're going to be able to pay off all of our cards before that time point and still have enough to put down on the house, move, all the expenses of moving, etc. How do we approach that? Right? Very critical thing here. This is where the average street knowledge about how credit works will not save you. In fact, there's a lot of contradictory information out there. What most people don't know is that 30% of their score, 30% of their credit score comes from the amount of debt that they carry on their credit cards. 30%. That is only 5% less than how you pay your bills.
Oh, yeah.
That's huge. You could pay your bills on time every month. That's 35% of your credit score. But carry huge balances, and 30% of your score is going to be in the toilet.
Right.
It's going to be in the tank, right? So here's what people don't know. When they want to purchase a house, the credit scoring model looks for the highest balance first. So in other words, let's say you had 5 credit cards. 4 of them are paid off, and you just rolled all that money over, all of the debt over to the no-interest card. And now that card is maxed out, right? Well, that's great for getting out of debt because you're not paying any interest, but it will tank your credit score.
Right.
Because the scoring model is looking for that debt utilization. How much of your credit limit are you using? And it looks at it in increments of 20%. So like the A zone is that first 20%, 0 to 20% of the card. So if you had a credit card with a $1,000 limit and you had under $200 on it, you're in the A zone. You're actually benefiting your credit score by balance in that zone. And it decreases with each 20% you step up. Once you cross that 40% line, you start it to hurt your score. But Joe, I pay my bills on time. Doesn't matter. That's the first category. This is the second category. So that's where it really can tank you. So
talk about the store cards also.
Yes, this is boy. I don't want to offend the Macy's employees out there. I won't say it. Macy's, forgive me. I won't mention you.
It's too late.
It's too late. There are some credit. This is why I say stick with only the major credit cards. Avoid those department store cards. The folks that offer you 10% off when you're checking out. If you get a discount of 10% if you apply for our store card. Avoid those because some of those credit card companies don't report your limit. Right. They only report your high spending amount
They're
as your
flex
limit.
Cards.
So what happens is you end up, going to the department store and they say, oh, you've been approved for $5,000 and you never charge more than $300. Well, that's what they report as your limit. So, this year when you're very responsible and you only charge $280, the most you ever spent was $300. Well, as far as your credit looks, you're maxed out. And it tanks your credit score.
Yep.
Stick with the major credit cards, Visa, Master, those kind of cards, Discover, etc. And then when you are looking at purchasing a house, if this is your goal, here's your strategy, folks. Pay close attention on this one, right? Your goal isn't to pay off a single card. Paying off a single card and still having a high balance on another card will do nothing for you on a credit score. If you're approaching buying a house and that is your goal, then you will want to pay down the balance of all of your cards as low as you can get all of your cards. You take that money that you have and spread it out over all of the cards to get the percentage of your balance the lowest possible.
Right.
You really want to get all of your credit cards under 30% when you're going to purchase a home. That's the goal. Shoot for under 30%. If you can get it under 20%, that's the A zone. But under the 40% zone, you're still benefiting your score. It's not as huge. It's not as good a benefit as the A zone. But if you cross that 40% line, now you start hurting yourself.
And it goes back to goal setting. It depends on what you're doing, right?
What's your goal?
What's your goal? You're looking at buying a new home for 2014, then you have to understand how to manage your credit accordingly. If you're looking at paying off debt for 2014, you got to manage that accordingly. We talked about the small victories.
Absolutely.
Paying off small items right there. If you're looking at establishing for a long term, you're looking at buying for 2015, and you've got no credit. Again, that's a goal. Establish credit for 2014.
Establish credit.
Start by going that.
And Chris, talk about how long you want to see some seasoned credit.
Most all lenders out there want to at least see 12 months. That's sort of the seasoning right there. And the reason why is from an underwriting perspective, you can get a good idea of a person's ability to pay, especially ability to repay, and with the new QM, when you have a 12-month history of repayment. But if you just establish credit, because we see this all the time, I want to buy a home, so I went ahead and got these credit cards, and I've been paying them on time, and I pull their credit, and they've had them for 3 months. Well, if you paid something for 3 months, I applaud you on it. It's great. Pay it for 12 months, and then we'll come back and speak on things. And there's talk even that it might even start going longer because what the mortgage industry is looking at is trying to establish the best qualified buyer, because one of the things that the industry wants to do is to ensure that not only you're in the home today, but you're in the home 10 years from now if you still want to be in that home.
And Chris,
that's sort of the quality that we're looking for.
We're running low on time, and it's when it gets to the credit side, there's always so much information to give people.
Absolutely.
I know it's a lot of information. Just to give people a concept, when we talk about how to be a good steward of your finances, you can start out with no credit. And hear me, folks, when I say this, no credit is bad credit. And if you have no credit, you have bad credit, then you are paying more for insurance, you're paying more for everything that involves credit or lending across the board, which translates to me as bad steward of finances. So if you are in the no credit situation and you're saying, hey, my goal is to purchase a house, Chris just said you have to have 12 months of history, right? I can sit down with somebody and show them how to have a mix of credit, installment loan, 2 credit cards, utilize those cards throughout a year, and pay a maximum about $100 in interest over the course of the entire year. Right? And I guarantee you that $100 will be paltry in comparison to how much you save on auto insurance, home insurance, everything else in the following year.
I would agree with you.
Well, Joe and Chris, we're kind of coming up towards the end here. What would you like to have people take away from your appearance on the show today?
How about you, Joe? What do you want them to take away from the show?
It really is. Success in life is very much about setting clearly defined goals and working towards those and measuring yourself along the way. So set good financial goals, do the homework, sit down and do it as a family and work towards that. And call a credit expert to help you. 281-914-4116.
Wow.
That is great. Well, my goal for 2014, tell everybody, is set your goals, put them down, put them on a board, make it happen, be a good steward of credit right there. Also know that we're in a very strong market, and more importantly, find a great organization to get involved with 2014. Until next year, we will talk to you soon.
And you've been listening to the Real Estate Rat Pack. The question is, who's Frank, who's Sammy, who's Dean, and who's the other guy?
Chris is Frank,
I'm
he's
Dean.
and I'm Sammy.
Yes, Dean. That's right. Yeah.
So tune in to the really big show every Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on 100.7 The Word, KKHT.